Some DLCs add extra weapons, maybe a new story, maybe a new area to the game. But every now and then a developer releases a DLC or expansion pack that feels way bigger than just an add-on. I'm talking about entire worlds, new game mechanics, stories sometimes better than the actual original game. And before we get into this countdown, I just want to acknowledge that I know there are a lot of huge DLCs out there, and obviously I couldn't cover them all today. So if your favorite DLC isn't in this video, let me know in the comments and I'll dig into it and maybe try to include it in another video, because I know there are bound to be more legendary expansions out there. But these 5 should have genuinely been full games. They might even be considered that right now. So to kick off with a blinder, I'm starting with Bloodborne, The Old Hunters. From Software already created one of the greatest games ever made with Bloodborne, and somehow they made it even better. The Old Hunters isn't just an expansion of the original world. It feels like a missing piece of the puzzle. The DLC takes everything that everyone loved about the original game, the cosmic insanity, the aggression, the horror, and then it pushed it all further. The weapons alone are ridiculous. The whirligig saw, the rakuyo, the boom hunter. Every new weapon felt less like just a new item and more like a new play style. But the real reason that people worship this DLC is got to be the bosses. Ludwig is still one of the best boss fights in any From Software game. Not just mechanically, but also emotionally. The music changes and the atmosphere changes. The fight itself transforms almost halfway through into something kind of tragic. And somehow the DLC doesn't really stop there. It keeps going. Lady Maria became an instant fan favorite. Orphan of Kos still traumatizes people to this day. And the lore revelations completely recontextualize the whole Bloodborne ecosystem. This is the kind of DLC that you could argue makes the original game feel incomplete without it. If The Old Hunters released today as like a standalone $40 experience, people would still call it a masterpiece. Next in at number 4, we got Fallout New Vegas, Old World Blues. This DLC is proof that developers can take the dumbest idea and somehow create genius. Old World Blues is weird, like aggressively weird. Talking appliances, insane scientists, a giant floating brain, and everything about it sounds like ridiculous on paper, right? But that's exactly why a lot of people loved it. And in my case, I didn't think New Vegas was like the best in the series, but this DLC is definitely a standout. Because underneath all the absurdity and the comedy, it's basically incredibly atmospheric. And one of the most memorable things for me that Fallout's ever done. There's this strange loneliness to Big MT. The feeling that this entire place is like broken and frozen in time, filled with experiments that maybe should never have existed. And somehow the writing or the setup of that balances a comedy with some emotional depth. And a lot of people forget that about New Vegas. You know, after all the memes are said and done, the writing was really interesting. And Old World Blues feels like where that was completely unleashed. No restriction, no realism, but just pure sci-fi fantasy. And yeah, a lot of people consider it excellent, maybe their favorite part of New Vegas, so I'm putting it in this list. Guys, now we're going into the top 3. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. If you like deep dives on games, analysis of the industry, platinum trophy lists, you get it all right here. So in at number 3 is Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree. This honestly stopped feeling like a DLC the second people realized how massive it was. And from my memory, it even caused controversy at the Game Awards because, you know, how can a DLC be up for Best RPG or whatever? But to be fair, This DLC is bigger than many RPGs are from the start. The moments players stepped into the Land of Shadow, everyone had the same reaction. How is this just an expansion? New regions, new enemies, entire legacy dungeons. Some of the hardest and most interesting bosses From Software have ever created. And as they're already appearing for a second time in this list, we have to give them props. This DLC somehow recaptured the original game, recreating that feeling of getting lost in a huge, expansive world, being able to decide where you want to go and what do you want to do. And visually, some of the environments are incredible. Just like the original game, there are moments when you stop and just take in the wonder and the awe of the world. Then there's Mesmer, a character who entered the From Software Hall of Fame before many people had even fought him. That design alone sold the expansion for half the internet. But what really makes this expansion feel important is something different. Like with Bloodborne, it didn't really feel optional. It felt like almost a missing part of the original game, which, don't get me wrong, was already very extensive. And that's why people became obsessed with it almost instantly. So in at number 2 is Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, one of my personal favorites. Not only is Cyberpunk one of the greatest comebacks in gaming history, but a lot of that is in part to this DLC. It changed how people saw Cyberpunk entirely. I've got a whole video about Cyberpunk's redemption story, so don't forget to check that out. But I want to say really quickly is that this was part of that story. For years, Cyberpunk 2077 carried a lot of baggage. And once this was released, a lot changed. A lot of people started saying or asking the question, is this worth it again? Dogtown alone feels more alive than a lot of other open world games do over the entire map. The atmosphere is dangerous, claustrophobic, tense. Everything feels kind of unstable. And the spy thriller angle completely, 180s the tone of the game. This game suddenly became part spy thriller, part espionage story, part psychological disaster. And then there's my boy Idris Elba, which still now, when I play it, it feels kind of unreal. But the real reason that Phantom Liberty actually worked is because it finally delivered on that fantasy that people wanted from Cyberpunk right from the beginning. The choices feel more meaningful, the writing feels sharper, and the pacing is tighter. They also overhauled a lot of the graphics and mechanics, although they were technically separate releases. And some of the endings of this are absolutely brutal. Not sad in a manipulative way, just emotionally exhausting in the best possible way. And honestly, for me, there are moments in Phantom Liberty that are better than in the base game. And I know I'm gonna get a lot of crap for saying that, but it's true. And I don't think that's even an insult to Cyberpunk, by the way. That's how good the DLC is. You've probably noticed a pattern. We had a couple of games from Software, and now we have another one from Project Red. Number 1 is The Witcher 3 Blood and Wine expansion. And in my mind, this is the expansion that every DLC should be compared to. Blood and Wine is crazy. It's crazy value. It's crazy big. It's amazing. There are so many full-priced games out there that have nothing on this DLC. A complete new region, a new story, new monsters, new systems, and Tucson still might be one of the most incredible looking locations that CD Projekt Red has ever made, especially considering you spend so much time in the base game in areas that look nothing like this. Everyone will remember the first time they enter Tucson. The colors, the music, the atmosphere. At first, it kind of feels relaxing until it isn't. Because underneath all that beauty is one of the darkest stories The Witcher has ever told. And that is exactly why people remember it so vividly. But for me, what makes Blood and Wine so memorable is the feeling that it might be Geralt's last adventure that we see, in-game from Project Red. There's definitely an emotional weight being carried throughout the game, throughout this DLC part. Like, the game itself knows it's wrapping up or, closing a chapter. And especially with this game, if you spent hundreds of hours with the base game, you definitely feel some of that weight. And it has that unforgettable moment at the end in Corvo Bianco where Geralt does that little smile. It has to be one of the most satisfying endings to a game ever, which is insane, because remember, I'm still talking about a DLC, not an actual game. All the DLCs I talked about obviously had a lot of love and care go into their development, but I want to know what you think. Do you agree with this list, or do you have your own list? Do you think this list is nonsense? Let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.